Ever noticed your favorite snack costs more now? That's the work of inflation, the invisible thief. Today I'll show you how to outsmart it and save your money. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Money Matters, where we cover everything about finance and making your money work for you. Why? Simple, because your school doesn't. And won't. Today we're talking about the reason everything keeps getting more expensive. Inflation. It's a term you've probably heard thrown around in the news, especially when the economy is in the spotlight. But what exactly is it? Imagine working hard, saving up, only to find out that your money doesn't stretch as far as it used to. That's inflation in action. It silently erodes the value of your money over time, making things more expensive and your purchasing power weaker. But don't worry. In this video, we'll break down the ins and outs of inflation, why it happens, and most importantly, how you can navigate it to protect your hard-earned cash. Let's get started. The mechanics of inflation. Okay, so we've established that inflation is like this sneaky thief, silently chipping away at your money's value. But how does it actually work? Let's break it down. At its core, inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, causing the purchasing power of currency to fall. Think of it as the opposite of your money growing on trees. Instead, it's like the tree is slowly shrinking. But why does inflation happen? There are a few culprits. Demand-pull inflation. This occurs when demand for goods and services exceeds their supply. Imagine everyone suddenly wanting to buy the latest smartphone. If the demand is too high and the supply can't keep up, prices will rise. Cost-push inflation. This is when the costs to produce goods and services increase, causing producers to raise prices to maintain their profit margins. Think of it as the domino effect. If the price of oil goes up, the cost of transporting goods goes up, which can then lead to higher prices for those goods. Built-in inflation, also known as wage price inflation. This happens when workers demand higher wages, and if they get those higher wages, companies then raise their prices to cover the higher wage costs. Each type of inflation has its own set of triggers, but they all result in the same thing: higher prices for you, the consumer. And while a little inflation can be good for the economy, too much can be a problem. But more on that later. Understanding the mechanics is crucial, but history also has some lessons for us. Let's take a trip back in time. Historical context. History has a way of teaching us valuable lessons, and when it comes to inflation, there are some significant events we should all be aware of. Let's take a quick trip down memory lane. The 1920s Germany hyperinflation. After World War I, Germany experienced one of the most extreme cases of hyperinflation. At its peak, prices doubled every few days. People were literally using wheelbarrows full of money to buy a loaf of bread. It's a stark reminder of how unchecked inflation can spiral out of control. The 1970s oil crisis. Fast forward to the 1970s, and the world faced an oil embargo that led to skyrocketing oil prices. This, in turn, caused a surge in inflation rates, especially in the US, where prices rose at an alarming rate, and interest rates soared to combat it. Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Another case of hyperinflation, where at one point a $100 trillion note was printed. The causes were complex, including land reforms and fiscal mismanagement, but the effects were devastating for the average citizen. Venezuela's ongoing crisis. Starting in the 2010s and continuing today, Venezuela has faced extreme hyperinflation, with prices doubling every few weeks at times. This has led to severe economic and humanitarian crises. But it's not only Venezuela. Inflation is worldwide, making people's lives harder. How exactly? We'll look at that next. Real-world impact of inflation. You might be thinking, okay, so inflation has happened in the past, but how does it affect me today? Well, let's dive into that. Inflation isn't just a historical or economic term. It has real, tangible effects on our daily lives. Purchasing power. The most immediate impact of inflation is the erosion of your purchasing power. Imagine you've saved $100 last year, and this year there's a 5% inflation rate. That means your $100 can only buy what $95 could have bought last year. Over time, this can significantly reduce the value of your savings. Savings and investments. If you're saving money in a bank account that offers a 2% interest rate, but inflation is at 3%, you're effectively losing money. This is why it's crucial to consider inflation when making investment decisions. Wages and employment. While some jobs might offer cost of living raises to keep up with inflation, not all do. And if you're a low earner, the effects can be even more pronounced. As prices rise, your salary might not stretch as far as it used to. You might soon, if not already, find yourself struggling even to afford basic necessities like groceries. This can lead to a significant decline in your standard of living and eventually also your health, loans, and mortgages. On the flip side, if you have a fixed-rate mortgage or loan, inflation can be your friend. As inflation rises, the real value of your debt decreases, making it easier to pay off in the long run. Everyday expenses. As mentioned before, from the gas you put in your car to the food you buy at the grocery store, inflation can drive up the cost of everyday items, making it more expensive to live, possibly driving you into debt. But I've also made not one, but 2 videos on that if you're interested. See them? We've seen the present effects, but what about the road ahead? Let's find out. Future implications. Inflation, with its far-reaching tentacles, doesn't just impact the present, it casts a shadow on the future as well. As we navigate these turbulent economic waters, it's essential to consider what lies ahead. Predicted trends. Many experts believe that while we might see elevated inflation rates in the short term, especially due to post-pandemic recovery efforts, it might stabilize in the medium to long term. However, the exact trajectory is a topic of debate among economists. Technological advancements. The rise of technology and automation could act as a deflationary force. As processes become more efficient and production costs decrease, we might see a reduction in prices for various goods and services. Global supply chains. Disruptions in global supply chains, as witnessed during the pandemic, can lead to short-term inflationary spikes. However, as industries adapt and diversify their supply sources, such vulnerabilities might decrease. Environmental concerns. Environmental degradation could lead to scarcity in resources, driving up prices. Sustainable practices and green technologies might become not just an ethical choice, but an economic necessity. Shift in global economic power. Emerging markets are rapidly growing and could play a more dominant role in the global economy. Their economic policies, growth rates, and inflationary pressures will have a more pronounced impact on global inflation trends. Extinction of the middle class. This is already happening. Inflation is silently erasing the middle class. As everyday prices soar, our budgets tighten, yet the elites profit even more. We pay the price. They keep the difference, widening the wealth gap. This will likely continue to the point where there's only poverty and extreme wealth. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme. Although the negative scenarios are more realistic to come into play, there's no point in sleepless nights. By staying informed and adapting fast to changing circumstances, individuals and businesses can navigate the inflationary maze and emerge stronger on the other side. Predictions are one thing, but how are nations reacting today? Let's go on a global tour. Global perspective. Inflation isn't just a localized issue, it's a global phenomenon. Different countries face unique challenges and employ varied strategies to combat rising prices. Let's take a whirlwind tour around the world to see how nations are grappling with inflation. United States. The Federal Reserve, America's central bank, uses interest rates as a primary tool to control inflation. Additionally, the Fed has been implementing quantitative easing, buying vast amounts of government securities to inject money into the economy. While this can boost economic activity, it also has the potential to exacerbate inflationary pressures. Short version, they're printing more money while hoping they make it better, but it's actually making it worse. European Union. The European Central Bank, ECB, aims to maintain price stability with an inflation rate target below, but close to, 2% over the medium term. Like the US, the ECB has also engaged in quantitative easing, purchasing government bonds to increase liquidity. This approach, while supportive of economic growth, can contribute to rising inflation if not carefully managed. Japan. Japan has faced prolonged periods of deflation rather than inflation. The Bank of Japan has implemented various strategies, including negative interest rates and massive asset purchases, to stimulate the economy and achieve its inflation target. Emerging markets. Countries like Brazil, India, and Turkey often face higher inflation rates due to factors like volatile currencies, supply chain disruptions, and fiscal policies. Central banks in these nations frequently use interest rate hikes and currency interventions as tools to curb inflation. Central bank coordination. In today's interconnected world, central banks often coordinate their efforts, especially during global economic crises. Joint actions can help stabilize global financial markets and mitigate the effects of inflation. Countries have their strategies, but what about us, the people? Here's how you can navigate these choppy waters. Navigating through inflation. Okay, I guess by now we all understand that inflation is very bad, but what can we do to stop it? Oh, well, there is nothing we can do. But while we can't stop it, we can get through it and make the most of it. Here's how. Diversify your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversifying across different asset classes can help protect your portfolio from inflation. Consider assets that historically perform well during inflationary periods, such as real estate, commodities, or stocks of companies with strong pricing power. Consider inflation-protected securities. Some countries offer inflation-protected bonds, like the U.S. Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, TIPS. These bonds adjust their principal value with inflation, ensuring that your investment keeps pace with rising prices. Reassess your budget. If you're feeling the pinch of rising prices, it might be time to revisit your budget. Look for areas where you can cut back and prioritize essential expenses. Remember, it's always a good idea to have an emergency fund for unexpected costs. Lock in fixed rates. If you're considering taking out a loan or mortgage, now might be the time to lock in a fixed rate. As we mentioned earlier, inflation can reduce the real value of fixed-rate debts over time. Stay informed. Keep an eye on inflation rates and economic forecasts. Being informed will help you make proactive decisions rather than reactive ones. Seek professional advice. If you're unsure about how to navigate inflation, consider seeking advice from a financial planner or advisor. They can provide personalized strategies based on your financial situation and goals. Inflation might be a challenging opponent, but with the right strategies and a proactive approach, you can navigate its waters and ensure your financial well-being. Congrats, you made it to the end. As we wrap up, we hope you found value in today's video on inflation. If you did, please share it with someone who might benefit too. Remember, financial knowledge is crucial, and as our name already states, money does matter. We'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts and any topic suggestions in the comments. Your feedback shapes our content. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more videos about what schools won't teach you. Thank you for being with us today at Money Matters, where we make your money matter. See you next time. Oh, you're still here, but the video just ended. Well, since you're already here, don't forget to click this video on the left and subscribe to my channel on the right. All right, that's all for today. Seriously. See ya.